Hey book lovers, Kaylee here and welcome back to the Enchanted Library. Today's video is going to be a little bit different, but it's actually something that I've wanted to do since I started my channel, and I was going to do it sooner, but I got a little bit scared because Kayla from Books and Lala did a very similar video, I think back in around May, and I didn't want it to seem like I was copying her or anything else, so I sort of put it to the back of my mind, but it was always there still, and I still wanted to do it, so I'm just throwing caution into the wind, and I'm going to do this because I want to, and I'm excited to, and I just think it's a very interesting project. So as you can probably tell from the title of this video, I want to read my ancestry. A little bit of background information: I have always been interested in history and historical fiction and all of that fun stuff, and my mom and I always watch Who Do You Think You Are? And it's a television program, if you aren't aware, that goes and delves into the genealogy of celebrities, essentially, and I feel like this is the closest that I'm going to get to being on that show. But hey, Ancestry, if you want to, do a little YouTube version where I can do awesome things like what you do on your TV show, I am all game. But in my mini version, I am doing everything based on books. My mom is really the genealogist of the family. She has delved back into our history for the past, I think she's been doing it for almost 25 years now, and she has gone back so far in our history that at this point, in order to get more information, we would actually have to go to the locations and dig up actual papers and things that came from that era. So not everything is digitized yet, unfortunately, but she has made it pretty much as far as she can with the information that is accessible online and through library resources and that sort of thing. So this all ties in because about 2 years ago, my parents each took a DNA test. My dad took his DNA test from 23andMe, and my mom took her DNA test through ancestry.ca. So I'm combining these two forms of data in order to discover what is my ancestry. I've always had an idea of what my ancestry is just because I do have that as my mother being really into, so I know a lot of my background, but I wanted to find a way to incorporate this into literature because, as you know, I love to read. So what I plan on doing is taking the data from 23andMe on my dad's side and ancestry.ca on my mom's side and putting together a reading list. Each video that I'm going to be posting, it might be once a month, it might be once every couple of months, it sort of just depends on how quick I can read and my other schedules. So I want to read a book that was written in the time period that I had relatives living in that same area. So I'm hoping that this is going to make sense a little bit more in a moment, but let's delve into the data of my family first. So I've always known that the most prevalent ancestry that I have on my dad's side is Czech. Another thing that you can tell from my dad's data is that he is 99.4% European. And then from there you can see the breakdown that 26.7% is Czech Republic. And just below that, 21.5% is British and Irish. The next most prevalent is German and French, and that is 11.3%. And the next one down is going to be the farthest that I go with this, and that is 2.2% Iberian. I wanted to break it down a little bit further so I could get years to base things on. So when I'm picking books, I wanted to have a range that I could look into, because it's one thing to say, yeah, I'm 25.6% Czech, but what does that mean? What books should I look into? What time frames should I check out? So what I've done from here is broken it down even further, because in each of the segments that 23andMe does, it tells you what generation was from that time, and it gives you the year time frame. So in terms of Czech, the breakdown that my dad would have would be that a parent to a great-grandparent was born in the Czech Republic between 1880 and 1940. This is where I'm getting my range from. So when I'm looking into a book, I am, for example, going to be looking for something that was written between 1880 and 1940 in the Czech Republic. That being said, that is the most difficult thing to find. I scoured the internet for a book that was in that time frame, based in the Czech Republic and written in English, and I I really couldn't find anything. So I had to do a little bit of tweaking with this one in particular, but for the rest of them it worked out pretty well. Now also, because British and Irish was also very prevalent, that is another one that broke down to being a parent or great-grandparent between those same years of 1880 and 1940 that we had relatives. So I took a look into books that were written in that time again for that particular country. Between 1820 and 1880, my dad had relatives that would have been his first to his third great-grandparent who lived in that time, and that would have been French and German. And then going back as far as I planned on going, this will be between the third great and the seventh great-grandparent for, again, my dad. And this is something that I looked for written between 1700s and the 1820s in Scandinavia, because that is going to be also Iberian. Now let's flip on over to my mom's side. So like I said before, my mom used ancestry.ca for her genealogy DNA test. So the data was broken down a little bit differently, but I still tried to use the same parameters. So going by percentages and then breaking that down, and then using our family tree that she has on ancestry.ca to determine the generations and the years that I'm going to be looking at, but I'm also using the same time frames. So for a parent to a great-grandparent, I'm still looking for something based within the 1880s to the 1940s. I think I found my mom's the most interesting though, because where my dad's I had that idea, I knew that background. For my mom's, I've always known her side to be French and a bit Irish, because all of our ancestors emigrated basically over from France, and she has this really cool feature on Ancestry that will actually show you where they sort of came from and where they expanded to. So it shows my ancestors going from France, immigrating over to New York, and how they dispersed from there. So that was very, very interesting. And the way that my mom has researched her side of the family, there are all of these different little stories, like of a silver teapot that came over and had its own sort of life because it passed down through generations, and then it went missing. And there are stories and journal entries written from my relatives that talk about it. And then there's also the fact that one of our ancestors was a hat maker to a king. And then we also have family that were considered daughters of the king, which has a very interesting history in and of itself. So it's just, I feel like there's a lot more stories that my mom has been able to uncover from her side of the family, and I want to delve more into that as well, which I will get more into in a moment. But for now, we are going to break down my mom's side. So why I say I found the whole French thing interesting is that I don't really have a breakdown for anybody in France for that time frame, which is really weird to me. So basically every other country but France is going to be listed in here. Surprisingly, the most prevalent in my mom's side is Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, and that is 36%, which is crazy. I was highly expecting that to be French, but apparently not. However, this does help me understand why I love Irish breakfast tea so much. From there, the next most prevalent is Scandinavian at 24%, and 18% for the Iberian Peninsula, and 7% for Great Britain. It's not broken down the same way that 23andMe broke down my dad's side of the DNA, and that is, it didn't give the parameters. So like I said, I'm going to be trying to focus on those parameters most and figure it out in my own little sleuthing skills. So like I also said before, my mom has her ancestry.ca profile where it has our family tree from that side, and it goes on and on and on and on. So I ended up stopping at about the 5th generation back, because I just thought that that made the most sense, so then that way it was still similar to what my dad's side was broken down as. So going between 1880 and 1940 for the parent to great-grandparent side, when I looked at the actual family tree, that really only narrowed things down minimally and is still fairly close to home. So we're looking at Canada, in Ontario, and in the States my family is mainly in Michigan and Indiana for that time frame. The next range that I'm looking at is great-grandparent to third great-grandparent. And again, when I was looking through the family tree, there were a lot of the same things. So a lot of the same area, same country, as well as a lot of the States and Canada. So the one that stood out the most that was different was Kent, England. And ironically, I already had a book that I had on my TBR for a couple of years now that is set in Kent, England. So I think that worked out quite well. And then the furthest back again that I'm going between the 3rd and 7th great grandparents is Scotland, particularly in Inverness. And there is one book that I just had to choose for that, and you'll have to stay tuned to the series to figure that one out. So those are all of the data points for how I am coming up with the books that I plan on reading. This isn't necessarily going to be a TBR video to go over all of them. I will show you, however, a couple of the books that I have picked up already because I have shown them in hauls or I've previously owned them. So I'll let you know those, but because this is going to be an ongoing series and it's always going to be progressing, there is going to be additional books obviously that I'm going to be adding in, and each month, or like I said, every couple of months, I'm going to have a video dedicated to the book that I read, and also a little bit of history because I want to know more about that time that my ancestors lived in. So while I'm reading the book, I want to adapt that to how my ancestors would have lived in that time and what they would have gone through, and maybe even how close they were to the author that had written the book. So it's all just a bunch of research and really exciting for me because I absolutely love this sort of thing. 2 of the books that I have here so far are ones that I ended up having to get historical fiction with because they were just too perfect to not use. So the first one is the Kent, England book. So I will be reading The Secret Keeper by Kate Morton. This has been on my TBR for quite some time, and I'm just so happy that it's going to work out for this little series that I have. The next one is the book that I needed to be based in the Czech Republic but written in English, and the only one that I could find I had never heard of before. I have no idea how this book is going to be, but it's called Of Light and Darkness by Shane Layton. And then the last one that I have here is actually 2 books because it's volume 1 and volume 2, and it is going to be for France, and that is The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. So these are the starter books that I'm going to be using for this series. I just find it so interesting being able to delve into your history and into your ancestry, and I hope that you guys are excited to come along on the ride with me. If you guys are also able to participate, please let me know in the comments down below because I would love to hear a little bit more about your backgrounds and what books you think would work well for them, and I just think that this is such a cool idea and I want it to be a bit interactive, so feel free to leave your comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more videos. I'm so excited to be doing this series, you have no idea, so stay tuned, and until next time, keep reading.